Okay, I'll start the recording. Okay, Leo, awesome to see you now here in this slightly different context.
Yeah,
Uh,
nice to see you as well. I'm here in New York City, as you might see from my back screen,
yes,
and
yes.
it's a beautiful sunny day. Like summer is around the corner. It's kind of unusually warm for a late May, but it's actually very warm, around 30 degrees Celsius, and it's just beautiful.
We sort of have the coldest year here in decades.
Yeah, we
Uh,
had also a cold winter this year, like a lot of snowstorms. And in spring was okay, but actually, summer came a little bit earlier, and I like it. I love sun. I love solar time. I'm a solar kind of person.
yes, you are, I know. Yeah, Leo, I want to talk with you about sort of like um, well, basically simply like your childhood.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's find out like where you come from. I know some of these stories, but let's, don't worry repeating yourself. This is
No, it's okay. Look, I will improvise, as you know. Like, I'm a lover of improvised music, and this is also improvised. Like to tell the stories, and I don't mind. Like, I'm actually in mood to tell stories because with my friend Dennis Ray, we are working on my book,
hmm
and
hmm
I will be telling the stories. We are recording this on Zoom, and every week, like for a couple of hours, and then telling many stories. Then he will help me to write the book. We will work together, and I enjoy telling the stories because I think a lot of people do not know my background. They know few things. They know that I was born in one country, that I grew up in other country, that I came to the third country, that my wife is from completely different country, and that all these kind of things. But I was born in former Yugoslavia in 1962, in a region called then and now Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is today is independent country for 28 years, 27, 28 years. But nobody from my family is actually from Bosnia. It's just by circumstances. I grew up with my maternal grandparents because my mother, who left the town where I used to live when she was 18, that was in early 50s. She only came back to my town to give a birth of, when I was born. Then after 3 4 weeks, because of various circumstances that it's not important for this kind of conversation, like I was kind of adopted by my grandparents,
hmm
maternal grandparents, and I also have kind of mystery about my father, who he was, like where he was coming from, and literally I don't know so much about my father. Maybe I don't know nothing or something, But from my maternal side, my grandfather,
do you know if your father is still alive?
no, probably he died, like because the only thing that I know that he was much older than my mother, and my mother will be like 80 years old, like next year, and which means that he probably, like died a long time ago. But there is so much mystery, and I'm very clear about my past. Like I don't suffer from things. I get over all this kind of traumas and dramas from my childhood, like long time ago.
hmm
Maybe because of my positive attitude. But just telling briefly about my grandparents, because they were extremely influential in my life, and I later can tell how, especially my financial, which is kind of interesting. My but maternal grandfather was born in Herzegovina, which is a part of Herzegovina, but actually on the border with Dalmatia, which is a part of Croatia, very close to Adriatic coast, which is his Mediterranean. It's very arid region, and a lot of people um, left like that region, like going to the New World, to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, North and South America. And but my grandfather, he was enrolled in Austro-Hungarian army in 1918, and unfortunately he only went in the war for 3 weeks because the war was ended, and he was very lucky. And then because he was displaced like from that part of where he was born to the northern part of today's Yugoslavia, close to border of today's Yugoslavia, today's Serbia with Romania. He stayed there and he finished the military academy, and he became a custom officer, and then he was transferred to Macedonia on the border with Macedonia, like between a former kingdom of Yugoslavia, Macedonia. Today, Macedonia, actually, they had to change name to Northern Macedonia, independent country in which you played with Stickman a few years ago in Skopje. But they will live very close to the border because that was a profession of my grandfather. And my mother, my grandmother, she was coming from a very kind of distinguished, aristocratic, very influential Montenegrin family. And through some kind of, family relationship, they were related to the aristocratic family of Petrovic, who were kind of monarchs of Montenegro and related to the Serbian monarchs. But also Princess Jelena, she married Italian king Vittorio Emanuele, and she became a queen of Italy. Kind of that's kind of my kind of a little kind of family background. But what is happening with my grandmother? Her mother died the same day when my grandmother was born. It was very difficult part, and unfortunately, my great grandmother died that same day. While my grandfather was a high rank official of Montenegrin army, and a few years later he died in a battle on the between Montenegro, today's Montenegro and Albania, during the first war fighting for Montenegrin army. He was colonel in the Turkish army, and that was during the first war. Then my grandmother and her sister and two brothers became kind of without parents. And what is happening when the war was over, my grandmother, who was only like 3-4 years old when the war ended in 1918, she was adopted by her aunts, and they lived in a city of Scutari or Shkedra. Shkedra in Albanian, Scutari in Italian, Skadar in Montenegrin Serbian. That's the second largest city in Albania today. But some people might know that Albania between the First and Second World War was not really colony of Italy, but it was kind of, it was called Protettorato d'Italia, like, it was kind of under the Italian rule. And Scutari was, or Shkodra was a very mixed city, like, Albanians, Montenegrins, Serbians, and Italians. And because her aunts lived there, that's, he grew up with her aunts. And then when, and they were on higher kind of class of, from aristocratic family, they sent her in the best school, and the best school in town were Italian school. And then in that Italian school, she learned Italian, and she was later, like, like in 20s, as a little girl, she was trained as a lyrical opera singer. And eventually, since the age of 7 or 8, she was influenced very much by Italian arias, by Puccini, Verdi, and all those great Italian composer, which is kind of just jumping like 50, 60 years later. It's kind of, that's where my kind of musical kind of education came, and I will tell about that a little bit later. But because my grandmother lived with one aunt in Scutari, she was, during the summer, she was visiting another aunt and her uncle was also a high rank official for Kingdom of Yugoslavia at the border. And she was only like 15, 16 years old. And my grandfather, who was, much older than her, like 14, 15 years older, spotted her. My grandfather was a very good looking, tall guy. He has like, he was riding a nice white horse, and, he was good looking, kind of military kind of guy. And he spotted this little girl, and he asked about this girl. And because she was 16, 15, they actually, what they wanted, like, they wanted just to get rid of her. Like, he said, look, if you like our little Roxanda, that's what her name, Roxanda Popovic Petrovic, maybe you can marry her. But, there was another guy who was looking at her. And then they said, look, there is somebody who's already interested in Roxana. But that guy was living in Chicago. He was Albanian, but he came during the summer. He said, look, I will come next year. And then I would like to propose marriage to Roxana, to my grandmother. But what is happening in those days, we are talking about 1929, 1930, that didn't happen because you cannot just take the flight, and go from Chicago to Albania, or Montenegro or Macedonia. And he didn't came. And my grandfather, he heard about that story. He said, look, since that guy is not in town and I'm not sure he is coming, I would like to propose to this girl. This is like old fashioned kind of, and of course they, in order to get rid of her, because, she grew, she didn't have parents and that was, in old time, and they married. They married on a New Year's Eve, December 31st of 1930. They had one son, which died immediately after he was born in 1931. And my mother was born in 1934 in Macedonia. And my aunt, Sonia, was also born in Macedonia. Then in 1940, what is interesting, 1940, because my grandfather was from Herzegovina, he was specialized in kind of, he was after the smugglers in tobacco. In those days, in Terry's, smuggling tobacco was like a big thing. And being like kind of custom officer, they were looking for this kind of people, mostly Lebanese and Egyptians and Greeks and Turkish, and that they're smuggling tobacco because they wanted to sell tobacco through certain channels to go to the West, because Macedonia, it's the biggest tobacco, northern Greece and today's Macedonia and Herzegovina. They are the three regions in Europe that they were producing tobacco. And then because he was from Herzegovina, there were other smugglers there, and he was from that part of the former Yugoslavia. They transferred them from Bitola, which is the second largest Macedonian city, very close to Greek border, to Mostar, which is the capital of Herzegovina, second largest city today in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And my grandfather was born not very far from there, but closer to the Adriatic coast. But what is happening, we're talking about 1940, 1941, German occupation, and then de facto Italian occupation, because the Italians were in pact, like Mussolini with Hitler, and they kind of split that part of Balkan Peninsula. Germans occupied most of it, and Italians occupied coastal part of Yugoslavia. And Mostar, Herzegovina, that's Mediterranean, that's very close to the 30, 40 kilometers you are on the Adriatic coast. But and then the war came, and then in 1943, when Italy capitulated, they had some problems, with the Germans, and and then other things, and in 44 they ended up in Sarajevo, because it was just liberated by Tito's partisans, and they went to Sarajevo thanks to a very famous Bosnian writer who was Sephardic Jew, Isaac Samokovlija, who was also a doctor, because Sephardic Jews, or as other Jews, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there were a lot of, we had kind of community of predominantly Sephardic Jews, some Ashkenazi, because they came from Austro-Hungarian Empire, that Bosnia was part of it. They had to leave Sarajevo to be in Mostar. That's how they became friends with my grandparents. And they actually helped my grandparents. Actually, probably they saved them life to move to Sarajevo. Mm-hmm. And this writer who wrote a couple of very famous books in Serbian, Croatian, whatever, Bosnian language, he was also translated many language. He died in 50s, but he was a personal friend. And he was actually the guy who helped my grandparents to move from Mostar to Sarajevo. And they supposed to stay in Sarajevo. Then Isaac Samokovlija, he was a doctor. He was going to immediately after the war in 1945. He was visiting several towns around Bosnia. And one day he came to my grandfather and said, look, my grandfather was called George. Said, there is this beautiful town you have to go. My grandfather knew the town, Jajce, which is where, several years, 20 years later, I was born, say, you should come and check something. And their local government, they're looking for qualified people because my grandfather was very qualified being an officer. And then my grandfather went there and then he liked. And then he said, look, I'm moving there. And then in 1946, I believe, immediately after Christmas, maybe beginning of January 1946, they established themselves in Jajce, which means that when I say that I was born in Bosnia, a lot of people say, oh, you are from Bosnia. Actually, I was born there and my grandparents lived there since 46 to 62. That's like 16 years. But nobody from my family actually was from Bosnia. That's kind of very interesting thing because kind of this important figure in the Bosnian literature was very kind of influential to save my grandparents to move to Sarajevo, then to influence my grandparents to move to the city where I was born.
Leo, so how did you research all of this, or did your grandmother or grandfather tell you most of this?
Look, I'm no. Look, my grandfather wasn't very kind of course, he finished military academy, but he wasn't really like he didn't like to read books. He only liked geography and history. But my grandmother was very educated woman, and then and my grandmother like always was kind of feeling kind of nostalgia from great days when they had very good life in Macedonia, because after the war finished, during the war, like everything changed, like, everything, like, and she really loved Macedonia. And then my grandmother was a great storyteller. And because she didn't have a very good relationship with any of three daughters, especially with my mother, they were always some sort of troublemakers. And being because she lost her son when at the birth, like which was a couple of months after he was born in 1931. I was kind of adopted son, and being kind of sort of adopted son with three daughters that they were kind of troublemakers that she didn't have a good relationship with for whatever reason. She treated me as a son or as a grandson, and she told me many stories. And because if you go back to like she knew, because coming from very influential Montenegrin royal family, she was able to trace like the origin of the family like for centuries and centuries. And she was proud of the fact that she was Montenegrin. And she told me those stories. And then my grandfather also told me certain stories. He was also a great storyteller, but he was telling me those stories in a different way. They didn't have a kind of normal kind of relationship. I think, because also my grandfather was in jail for 4 years. Somebody set him up in 1958, and he came out of jail in 1962, because what is happening, some of those people that the Kingdom of Yugoslavia asked him when they transferred from Macedonia to Herzegovina to go after them, these people, they remember that, and then kind of they manipulate certain things. So they set up my grandfather, and my grandfather, he wasn't drunk man, like but he liked to drink one glass of wine from time to time. But he was kind of drunk because they're his countrymen. They fooled him around. He became drunk and he signed a couple of documents. He went to the jail. And after he came from the jail, I was born. And then my grandparents kind of, they stayed together, but didn't have really kind of, I cannot say that they had, it's sort of, it's relation, because you marry with somebody, you stay for the rest of life. That was how it was in old times. And then, but my grandmother having this kind of presence of husband who is not really real presence, and then having a complex problem like issue with her three daughters. For my grandmother, I was probably the most important person in her life. And then she tried all her best to give me kind of certain kind of education, to teach me certain things as much she can, because look, don't forget, she was born in 1912. Like, she's kind of old, previous generation, like, but she was, she was a singer. She was singing all the time at home, Italian arias, and also music from 50s and 60s, like quality, good singers like Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, and Charles Navour. And that's how I started also listening to music. And she was always telling me stories, like, and that's how I learned, like, I was a little kid, and we were watching TV, and then she was telling me the stories, always related to something. She always remembered things, like, and that's how I get into the many things, like into the literature and the music, thanks to my grandmother.
So which language was your grandmother speaking with you?
Look, this is very kind of questionable kind of thing, because we are going now into the kind of trouble, because during the Tito, see, like before the First War, there were two languages, Croatian and Serbian, which is very similar. But during the Romantic period of in 19th century, all around Europe, but especially in Balkans, these kind of Slavic people from the south, they had kind of idea to put them, to have kind of identity as Southern Slavs. And that's how Yugoslavia became country in 1918, 1919, because Yugoslavia means country of place of Southern Slavs. And then between two wars, the language was Croatian and Serbian, very similar, but different. And after the war, that language by Tito was proclaimed to be called Serbo-Croatian or Croatian-Serbian. And Serbians call it Serbian-Croatian, and Croatian call it Croatian-Serbian. In Bosnia, we call it Serbo-Croatian, Croatian-Serbian, both ways, but language that we speak in Bosnia, variant of language, was much closer to Serbian language than to Croatian. And in today's environment of last 30 years, because of the horrible civil war in Bosnia and atrocities committed by Serbians or Serbs in Bosnia, Bosnian people decided that that language has to change the name, because you cannot call that language Serbian or Serbo-Croatian. They call it Bosnian, and which is kind of very strange to me, because if you go today to Bosnia, everybody will say that they speak Bosnian. But, I'm not sure about that, because that's kind of Bosnian variant of Serbian. But, because of the national pride, because of the atrocity of history, in few words, we spoke that language that was called so many different names. See, I come from the very complex country that is not very easy to explain in few words. And probably, I'm also a very complex person, and everything that I did is not very easy to explain.
But if we look at it in practical terms, so basically, if a former Yugoslavia, you can talk with everybody there. And
look, Serbo-Croatian language was lingua franca and official language of the country, and it was official language of Serbs, Croats, Bosnians, and Montenegrins. Then Slovenians had their own language, different, called Slovenian, but every Slovenian in school had to learn Serbo-Croatian. It's same thing like, when you met Xavi, Xavi Reja, like he's Catalan, he did schools in Catalan, but also in Spanish, because Spanish language is a national language, but Catalans speak Catalan, Basque, and Gallegos, Galician, but everybody has lingua franca Spanish, which is Castilian. Similar things we had in Yugoslavia. The Macedonians had their own language. Albanians in Kosovo, they had another language, but virtually everybody in Yugoslavia had to speak Serbo-Croatian or Croatian-Serbian. And today, this language was kind of fractured in 4 languages, in Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, and Bosnian, which is almost the same language.
Okay.
Very, 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 very complex. But of course, with Vasko Atanasovski, who is from Slovenia, we speak in Serbo-Croatian because he's of certain age that he did schools during the former Yugoslavia. And even though, of course, he's of Macedonian origin, but he was born and grew up in Slovenia, and he speaks Slovenian. But, of course, if I speak with him in my language, he understands. Same with my friend Vasya Ivanovski, who you met in Skopje, who is a former, very well-known journalist in the former Yugoslavia. When we speak, when we correspond in my language, but he has his own language, which is Macedonian.
Mm-hmm.
which I understand. I'm Macedonian and Slovenian. I can understand a little bit, but I cannot speak. But a little bit, I can understand a little bit. It's kind of like Italian and Spanish, or Spanish and Portuguese. That kind of similarities.
Okay, so the relationship with your grandmother was very special for both of you, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And
Also with my grandfather. Also with my grandfather, but in very different way.
yeah, yeah. So, but since like your grandmother, as you said, you sort of were the grandson, but also sort of like you fulfilled the function of the son, or
Yeah.
like you also hinted that maybe even a little bit like the man in the house, even though you were very young, right? So it's
Yeah.
which is interesting. And then and so basically your mother had left, and
Yeah.
but you ended up going to live with her, right?
Yeah, but that's very complex thing. See, like maybe it's my character. Like when I was I realized when I was 6 or 7 years old, or maybe 8 years old, that I lived in very dysfunctional kind of family, dysfunctional mother, dysfunctional aunts, two aunts. One was living in my town, one was living in the old capital of Bosnia, Travnik, which is only like 70 kilometers from Jajce. And my mother, who was kind of absent present, even though she was absent, and probably, I was kind of, she had, I cannot look, I, even though like I cannot judge my mother for things that she did, because everybody has its own story, but probably she didn't do right things, but who am I to say those things? That was her life, but she kind of left me. But actually she visited me like several times a year, and then she lived in Sarajevo, in capital of Sarajevo. After living in many places around Bosnia, she was working in she was changing job all the time, and then finally she established herself in 1963 in Sarajevo.
Mm-hmm.
And then from time to time she was taking me to Sarajevo. I remember my first trip that I kind of remember. It was in a bus from Jajce to Sarajevo when I was maybe 4.5, 5. I can remember that. I can remember. I and I have some pictures from that period, and I kind of there are a few things that from time to time come to my mind. And then in 1968, late 68, she moved to Dubrovnik, which is a very famous city on the southern Croatian coast, on Adriatic Sea, on Mediterranean. And that's where she met my stepfather, Mario. And then in 1971, my sister was born in Dubrovnik. And the same year, my mother moved to Italy. But when she lived in Sarajevo and Dubrovnik, I was visiting my mother all the time, especially in Dubrovnik. The whole summer, I was staying with my mother for 2 months, 3 months. School summer, I was going to the beach, beautiful town, beautiful weather. My mother was treating me nicely. Probably she was feeling guilty, but I felt that something wasn't right. I didn't understand. But on the same time, I felt that I need her, like, because I felt that my grandmother is not really my mother. It's just older woman who is my grandmother that I loved a lot. But something was attracted me to my mother because I probably needed that. And I didn't have a father figure. And my mother was conflicted. She didn't know if she wants me or if she doesn't want me. Then when she married to Italian guy in 1971, everybody expected that as every mother, like, that she will take me with me, which she didn't do, which means that the second time that she rejected me. And then I finished, high school, in high school in my town. But every summer I was traveling to Italy. First with my first 2 years with my grandmother. Then I was 13 years old. I started traveling by myself. My uncle would drive me to Dubrovnik, which is like 5 hours drive from Jajce to the coast. Then he will leave me with friends of my mother. And one of the friends of my mother, his wife is a friend, and the husband was kind of chief of the customs in Dubrovnik, and then he was putting me in the evening in the ferry, and in the cabin with special pass, and then that was overnight ride. Ship was leaving at 12 midnight, arriving 6:30, 7 o'clock in the Bari, and my mother will wait for me. And then that's how, since 1972, going every year to Italy, I learned Italian. And by 1980, when I was 18, I spoke perfect Italian. And then everybody was expecting that I will be, after high school, speaking perfect Italian, and also being de facto Italian citizen, even though I didn't have Italian passport, but I was automatically Italian citizen. Everybody expected me to go to Italy, but then there was like third rejection by my mother in my life, and she didn't want me to go to Italy for whatever reason. And then I went to Belgrade, but lived there 3 years, 2 years, but I realized that that's not for me. Then in meanwhile, I always loved my stepfather, and my stepfather, Mario Piepoli, was a beautiful human being. In the beginning, I was kind of frightened by him because my mother had this kind of established that kind of relationship, like you are my son, but this is my husband, his stepfather, you are your stepson. But then we became friends, and then because he really loved me, not just like me, loved me, I was able to convince him that I really want to go to Italy to live. He said, I didn't know. I said, look, I wanted to do that since 1972. And he was kind of upset, but he also was, having kind of, my mother was a special person, she was bipolar. She was having like some serious issues, but then I ended up living in Italy. And then that kind of 3 times rejection, I wanted kind of to reconnect with. Meanwhile, my grandparents died. My grandmother in 1984, 1 year after I moved to Italy, my grandfather in 1989. And I wanted to be in Italy because I really love the place, because Mediterranean, Bari, 310 days of sun, like beach, like is there, a lot of friends, and good food and beautiful, and I started studying like Portuguese language literature because I was attracted by Brazil and Portugal and all these kind of things, because Pelé was famous soccer football player, was my hero when I was a little kid. And but then living with my mother, I started getting kind of very difficult relationship. Like it was kind of suddenly my mother wanted me with her, but then she wanted to control me. And then, but I'm not kind of guy that you can control very easy. It's very difficult to control me. I'm very resistant, very stubborn. And during the years, that became very, very kind of difficult for me. Then what happened, I was very good student in the beginning, and my professor of Brazilian Portuguese literature, Fernanda Torriello, she really liked me. I was very active, reading a lot.
So this is the university in Bari, or
in Bari, yeah, because I studied in Belgrade for a couple of years, but I kind of just was there, I really wanted to go to Italy. Like for 2.5 years, I wanted to go to Italy. When I decided to go to Italy, I was late to enroll in university in 83. Then I started university in Italy only in 84, but I actually moved in Italy in 84. And during that year, I was kind of all around, I traveled, I went to Greece, I went to Maldives, I went,
And what did you study in Belgrade?
I studied Italian literature in Portuguese, Italian language literature and history, and philosophy. And first year I was very excited about everything because I was 18. But after that I kind of lost interest because I had one goal: I want to live in Italy. Even though I was born in Yugoslavia, since 1972 I kind of became sort of Italian because everything that I needed, that I loved, were more in Italy than in my country. Because when I came in country, I had kind of elderly grandparents that they loved me and I loved them, but I lived in a small environment, small town. It's very historical town, very famous town, even though very small. It was the very first capital of Kingdom of Bosnia from 13th century, but it's still small, like 15,000 people. And then, I had problems with my childhood because, because people were bullying me because of my mother, because I didn't know about my father. I was bullied all the time, and that's the reason that I wanted just to leave. And when I left, and of course I was leaving every summer to go to Italy, but when I left to Belgrade, I left forever. I said, I'm never coming back. And when I go to Belgrade, I knew that something was telling me that was just temporary. I had kind of like a confused young man of the age of 19, 20. I had kind of fantasies to go to tropical country, because I was into the tropics, or to go to live in Rome or Paris, or to go to live to Brazil because I loved Brazilian culture, those fantasies. I never dreamed anything about New York, about these things, even though I liked American music, American movies, American literature, but I never thought about coming to USA. But when I went to Italy, that was kind of thing, what I'm trying to say, meanwhile, very important kind of thing that this woman, my professor of Portuguese literature, she really liked me, and she said she started introducing Afro-Portuguese literature in the classes, especially from Angola, about among 5 countries in Africa: Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe. Angola was kind of the richest country in terms of history and culture. And we studied some Angolan writers and history. And then she said, look, I would like you to go to Angola. I can get you kind of a little little grant, very little, from the University of Luanda. They can pay for your apartment there. And, maybe if you develop your studies in this field, and if you want to be my assistant at university, help and go to the library, organizing library, being assistant, so you can have a job. And literally in 1987, I was thinking, wow, I will have a job for the rest of my life, because this is Italy. It's not private university. All universities in Italy are belonging to the state, And then when you go to these kind of places that belong to state, only if you do something very, very wrong, you will lose your job. And I was already saying, wow, that's great, because being working at university, you have a lot of free days, because if you are teaching, of course, I didn't expect to teach in the beginning, but one day if you're teaching, you're just teaching 10, 15, 20 hours a week, or less. But you have a lot of vacations, because, all holidays, the summer break, the winter break. And I said, wow, that's great, because I can enjoy what I enjoy, music and travels and this and that. And I was kind of dreaming about that. But then when I went to Africa, to Angola, in middle of November of 1987, I was excited for the first month. Then after that, I got in a very, very deep depression, because something very important happened in my life, which is another rejection. See, my life is full of rejections. I felt in love with a Sicilian girl who was a very extraordinary person. And we were kind of secretly dating, because, but then one day she decided to introduce me to her parents. That was in a beautiful city of Agrigento. And they were from Racalmuto, a small town. But we met in Agrigento. They took me in a nice restaurant. We sat at the table. We had nice conversation. I was a little kind of, in those days I was a little bit shy, but I was kind of, a little bit anxious, say, oh, this guy will bombard me with questions. And then at certain point, her father asked me very straightforward question, what's my religion? Because I wasn't really Italian. I was coming from Yugoslavia, and of course he knew that Yugoslavia is kind of formerly communist or socialist country, that there are a bunch of atheists over there. And I was actually brutally honest. I said, look, I respect all religions, but I'm not religious. I think I believe in cosmos, in energy, but I respect, and that's it. And that's it. Finito. Even though this girl, now woman, she wanted to leave that world, but she didn't have strength. She didn't have strength to to leave her world because it was comfortable. She was 22. And then I didn't have enough strength because I was just a student. I didn't have my independent life. It was kind of, difficult. It took me like 8 hours just to reach that place, by train. You have to take train from Bari to Reggio Calabria, take the ferry, and then take another train to Palermo, and then to Catania. Then it's. But look, it wasn't a really serious kind of relationship, but it was a very short one. But it kind of it's not because of love that didn't happen; it's rejection. And I said, why the like life is so kind of cruel? You are rejected by your mother. You are rejected by your society in former Yugoslavia. You are rejected by certain girls. And even when I was in Bari, when I tried to date girls, I was considered like strange guy, and because I started dating a girl, quite kind of dating, going out, and I published my first volume of poetry, which is kind of avant-garde poetry. She said, tu sei un poeta, and I gave her a book, and she was reading that book, and she said, ma è poesia strana, this is very strange poetry. And then say, oh, you like the music? I say, yeah. But then when I took her to my place to say, look, I will play some music. And I said, look, I will play a little bit of everything that I like. I started with Neil Young and, James Taylor and Crosby, Stills, Nash Young. Then I moved to the John Coltrane, my favorite thing. Then I started with Poundhouse, Van der Graaf Generator, and with Sun Ra and Ornette Coleman and Miles Davis and King Crimson. And she said, ma che musica strana. What a strange music. And my mother was making a lunch. And she just came to that in that moment in the room, and she heard that. Leonardo è molto strano. Say, ma sei strano, ti ho sempre detto che sei strano. Say, you are strange. I always told you are a strange guy. Why you cannot be like every normal person? I say, fuck, why I don't want to be normal person. I want to be myself. And I like one of the things that was struggling, before going to Africa, that I wanted to be myself. And every time when I wanted to be myself, there was a big obstacle. Don't forget that, yes, it was Italy, but it was deep south of Italy, And then when I went to Africa, I stayed there, I enjoyed my time, but everything that I was supposed to do there, to do research, I did only first month. Second month, I did know nothing. I got into very, very deep depression. Fortunately, I had good friends. We were listening good music. I was going to the beach. And then one day I decided to go to San Tome Principe, which is one of the smallest countries in the world, only 2 small islands. It's independent country from 75 was Portuguese colony. But the ticket was very expensive if you buy with real money. But because in Angola, that was during the Civil War, if you go to the kind of supermarket or international market where foreigners, diplomats, soldiers, no tourists in those days, of course, can buy stuff with hard currency. With I had Italian liras and I had Deutschmark, and I was able to buy Marlboro or Camel cigarettes and bottles of whiskey, and to sell at the parallel market for 20 times higher value in official money called Kwanza. And then a very famous Angolan writer, he was born in Portugal, José Luís Antonio Vieira, whom I befriended. He was at University of Luanda. I was working on a few things with him. He said, look, we can do this, because as a foreigner, I cannot buy that ticket with Kwanza, with local. I had to buy with hard currency. I only had Deutschmark and Italian liras. And then he said, university will buy, and you reimburse us in Kwanzas. And literally the ticket, I don't know how much it was costing because I don't remember. I paid with Italian liras. But let's say it was $500, but I probably paid 30, 40. And I went to San Tome Principe for 3 weeks. 2 weeks in San Tome, 1 week in Principe, then 3, 4 days in San Tome. And I went back to Angola. And then few days later, like I started having chills. I
Mhm.
got paludismo, which is malaria. It's a kind of Central African kind of version of malaria. And I got sick. Normally when you get malaria, it's kind of like flu. You get chills for a couple of days, and then normally like COVID, similar symptoms, even though it's very different. And then in most of the cases you are okay. But what is happening? I wasn't feeling well. They took me to the military hospital. Don't forget that in Angola in 1988 there was a civil war around Luanda, 50 or 60 kilometers. There was a free kind of protected zone controlled by United Nations. And then Luanda had a lot of Cuban and Soviet soldiers who were supporting the government, MPLA. While on the other side, in southern part of Angola, they had other faction. They were supported by South Africans and USA. Literally, like civil war was between two fractions in Angola, supported by Cuba and South Africa, but actually real guys that they supported were Soviets and Americans. And then I went to the military hospital. The first thing that I saw when they put me in that waiting room, I saw one of the most horrible scenes in my life. They just brought like 2 or 3 soldiers. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3. They were completely. One guy was missing a hand, like like his face was completely kind of. They probably just took him by helicopter from somewhere, from who knows from where, and it was kind of very, very shocking. But of course, that initial kind of shock was over, and then I was treated, and I went home. I stayed in hospital for until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I went home and I started feeling better, but in few days I started feeling worse. And then it was up and down, up and down, up and down. Then finally, my friend Maria, she was renting me like an apartment in Luanda. She was living in another place with her boyfriend. She said, look, let me take you to another hospital. She befriended one Italian guy who was friend with Italian doctor. Angola is still, it's an oil country. And a lot of this kind of, even though during the Civil War, a lot of these kind of companies, like especially European companies, not American companies, like especially like Agip from Italy was there. They had a little hospital. They took me to the hospital. And this young Italian doctor, I believe his name was Giacomo. He, after examining me, everything, and my blood, he said, look, and seeing my paperwork from the Cuban Soviet hospital, said, look, they treated you with wrong things. Everything is wrong. I said, okay, what I have to do? Look, you have to do this and that. I went back home and I started feeling worse and worse. For 7 days, I was hallucinating. But then I started feeling better. And then I called my stepfather. I said, look, I'm supposed to go to Mozambique. I had a ticket in the same arrangement, like paying with, buying cigarettes and liquor and, changing on a parallel market and, going for little money. I decided to go back, but I had to fly from Luanda to Moscow, stay one night on Sheremetyevo, fly to Rome, and then my stepfather will pick me up in Rome, and then this like 4 or 5 hours drive to Bari. But what is happening in meanwhile, probably because of some mechanical things, we stopped by in a country of Chad, in N'Djamena, during the night. It was no air condition. I was sweating because I had chills. The flight was full of Russian fishermen and Russian soldiers and some Cubans. I was the only kind of normal guy. And we stayed there for 5, 6 hours, because they had to fix old Tupolev. And then they had stopped another time in Budapest, and that's how I lost my connection from Moscow to Rome. When I came there, they put me on another flight, and I had to stay at one lousy hotel that is only for foreigners in transit. You cannot go out. And I called like a reception, and they sent a doctor who was probably he was from Tuva or from Buryatia. I was talking to Vlad the other day because he was kind of Chinese Mongolian looking, and he he gave me some pills, and he said, look, you are not in good shape. He was talking Russian. I don't speak Russian, but I can kind of understand a little bit Russian. We try to And then I came to Rome. My stepfather picked me up. Then when he took me home to Bari, I started feeling a little bit better. And what is amazing, like my hero, Terry Ribdal, was playing in town. And I supposed to go to hospital. And my friend Nicola took me to see Terry Ribdal. And after I was shaking during the whole show, he took me, like when he was packing his stuff after the show. Nicola was a friend of the promoter, the Italian said, no. And, I was able to shake hand to Terry Ribdal. He was playing with Chasers, 88, like, Bjorn Kelemir and Aidun Kleive, amazing trio. I was immediately after that show, I was taken to hospital. And I stayed in hospital for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost a lot of weight. I was like coming from, who knows from where like, and then I started thinking like about life, that period in hospital helped me to reinforce my dream to live, but I didn't know where. I wanted to leave to Rome or to Milano because, Italy, I speak Italian, I'm Italian citizen, but then my friend, Ivan, who was my roommate in Belgrade, he came to New York in 1985 and he called me like, say, look, you have to come to visit me. I wanted to visit him, but I actually never dreamed to live in USA or New York. Like I wanted to visit New York, of course. When we were roommates, we had like a map of New York City, like, and we were dreaming, so we'll go to Fillmore East, of course, Fillmore East didn't exist in the 80s, but we were dreaming about, let's go, like, where Allman Brothers recorded that famous double album and blah, blah, blah. But then he started kind of being kind of more, he knew my mother, because he, before moving to New York, he came to Italy to visit me several times. Stay at my place. And he said, look, Leonardo, like, you must come here. It took me a little while to kind of do certain things. Then my professor in Brazilian literature, he told me that he's organizing kind of event with the biggest and greatest Brazilian writer of all times who died 20 years ago, Jorge Amado. They will give him a laurea honoris causa, like honorary degree at University of Bari. And then I wanted to go to New York in January, February of 1990, but he said, like, wait until June. Then I waited June, and and then in August, on August 11, 1990, I came to New York, and next day I knew it. I'm here. That's it. I am not going back, which means that my life, full of many, many kind of rejections, came to the city, which was very tough. This is not for everybody, especially when you come without anything. Like I didn't speak in English. I didn't have any profession. I was helping my friend. He did very well. He bought a couple of Benetton stores. I was unpacking and packing, like, boxes full of merchandise, and in the stockroom and some shopping malls in New Jersey. Then I worked in a restaurant, but I realized immediately this is the city because it's very hard. But that's what I needed. I needed somebody or something to punch me in my face. Say, Leonardo, you must do it. And literally, I started living my dream on August 12, which is the second day of New York. That was because you call this series Living the Dream. I actually lived my dream all my life, because my dream was like to have family, to be accepted, to be loved, to be kind of, to have a peace and harmony, because I'm a very peaceful kind of guy, and I don't like to be in conflict with people. I'm a positive solar person, but the life wasn't nice to me because full of rejections, full of many bad things. I even didn't tell you anything. Like, probably I told you like privately, like, I was even kind of suffer kind of physical torture when I was a little kid by my aunts. But, that's another story. Like, but I always, even during the most difficult days in my life, I always had smile on my face, because I remember when my grandfather, I was 5 or 6, we were living in an old house on second floor. I showed that place to Borislav, Asaf, and Vicky and Kamal when we were in my town a few years ago. And we were living in an old house, second floor, and I saw seeing like one kind of a small mountain on one side, one small on the other side. There were 2 roads, and they're all kind of going to the north. And there is a big mountain in the back. And I asked my grandfather, Grandpa, what is on the other side of the mountain? He said, there is a wall. Where all these cars are going? Oh, they are going over there, like then they're going to another side of the mountain. I said, what is there? Like, oh, there's a big wall, like, like there is mountains, there are lakes and oceans and people and countries, like, And I said, Grandpa, I want to go there, like, that's the place I want to go there. And also the fact that he's, as I told you, he is coming from one of the poorest regions in former Yugoslavia, Herzegovina, which is very, very dry, and very poor. And a lot of people immigrated to all parts of the world, from Australia to Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, South America. His brother moved to Uruguay, first to Argentina, then to Uruguay in 1929. And he was writing these letters to my grandfather like once or twice a year. And my grandfather was putting me and my cousin, who also lived with us, she lived with us, like, and he was reading a couple of times a letter from his brother. And we're like little kids say, oh, Uncle Jose, Joseph, like Joe, Yozo, Uncle Jose, like, because we call him Uncle Jose, because, that was his name, Jose Pedro Pavkovic. And then I was dreaming to go to Uruguay. And then one day I remember saying, Grandpa, is Uruguay on the other side of the mountain? Oh, yeah, of course it's not. But, as a little kid, 5 years old, say, yeah, of course, I would like to visit my my grand uncle Jose, which I never visited. But then when I was for the first time in Uruguay with Levin brothers, by coincidence, Beledo and his wife were there, like, and then, I tried to find something, but, I wasn't able, to find. But I remember I told story to Tony and to Pete and Jeff Siegel and Eric Lawrence and Beledo. And it's kind of, it was great. We were sitting in a very nice seafood restaurant. I was telling them this story. And I felt like that my uncle is even though he died in 1984 or 5, I believe, I was feeling his presence somewhere. And I said, one day I will find something that is related to him, And you see, this kind of desire to travel was mostly, and to know people and to discover things. It's kind of related to all this kind of childhood that I reject. Like my friend Borislav that you met, like, we spoke about that. I know him for 50 years, and he moved to Sweden during the war in 1993, where he still lives. I was saying, look, Borislav, imagine if I had normal family, I'll be staying in Bosnia. My mother will not go to Italy. Then the war comes. Then I will be either like you, who moved his wife and 2 little daughters to Sweden, or I will be one of those guys who will be murdered, or I will murder somebody, or, all these kind of things. But see, like, you moved to Sweden, I moved to New York, Italy, New York, and we dreamed, like, we had little, I think we told you that story down in Casa Murada, like, he had little kind of a bar, like, we call it coffee place, cafeche, but it was kind of when young people go and listen to some good music. Normally he was playing blues and fusion and jazz and the classic rock, and he liked to cook. And remember Burda, like, and his mother was buying Burda, same as my grandmother, but at the end of Burda, there were like kind of 10, 12 or even more pages about food recipes. And he was seeing those recipes, said, oh, I would like to do something like this. But who understands this kind of food in this little town? And say, oh, one day I would like to be cook, like chef, which is today. And we were listening Roy Buchanan and Return Forever and say, oh, like, one day I would like to meet musicians and, be their friends, like, and we were drinking like beer together and coffee. And see, after that was in the 80s. And when I was visiting there, like I was in Italy already, but I was visiting my hometown. My grandfather was still alive. And after like 37 years, he's a chef, amazing cook. Mm-hmm. And I work with people like you or Tony or John Ettridge or Phil Mazzaner, like, this amazing. It's another kind of living, I lived certain kind of dreams that led me to achieve other kind of dreams. Look, I like what I do what I like. I don't make so much money, but I'm very, very happy person. The way how ended, because if my mother was kind of normal person like that, like maybe, maybe that was my destiny, like that my difficult childhood and all these kind of dysfunctions in my former country, my family, helped me to build all this kind of persona they have.
Mm-hmm.
And see, like I am a very friendly person. I'll have a lot of best friends. I like to be friend with so many people. I like to, even people say, "Oh, humans are bad." Like, no, humans are most beautiful people, creature in the world. You just have to find like great people to share your experience. It's not, of
Yes.
course there are bad people, but if you find good people, then people are great. And I believe in people. Like, that's why I have for me, it's very easy to become friends with people. Of course I have my favorite friends, but I have so many friends. I can go to any country in the world. I can always find friends. And because that's more was my escape from my rejection in a town where I didn't have any friends. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have any friends. I had
Mm-hmm.
one, but he was trying to be dominating me, like and kind of he then we didn't once I left that town, we weren't friends anymore, like And Borislav was 4 years older than me, like his other generation. I knew him since I was a little kid. My grandfather knew his father, and his wife was my neighbor. Like she lived like 50 meters from me. I know her. She's 1 year younger than me. Like we know each other for more than 50 years, but we became friends in '80s, and then especially after we found out each other in 2009 in Facebook, which is kind of nice thing that I was able to reconnect with my town where I was born through this guy. Because if
Mm-hmm.
not for Borislav, probably I will never kind of reconnect in a way that I reconnected with my town. And going back 2 years ago, after 30 plus years, to my town with my friends from 4 different countries, like one Indonesian, one Palestinian, one Israeli, and one kind of Italian, and me from New York, going to my town, it was kind of a sort of revanche, like to
Mm-hmm.
to stay to say, okay, Leonardo is back. I wasn't really that kind of guy that you were thinking of me 4 years ago.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I'm a good guy. I'm not just son of that woman that she was difficult person that people didn't like, or blah 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 blah, that I was bullied, and it was. And then bringing this kind of international band, you see, if I brought band only from one country, from Hungary or Italy or Greece, it's not the same. But bringing people from different parts of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and me coming from New York, it became kind of even more kind of symbolic that I came as a winner to myself. That it was kind of my the proof that I did something in my life, that I'm not like, even my mother, like she never believed in me. For my mother, I was always a loser, complete loser. And I don't know why, like but I prove with my way of living that
Yes.
I'm not loser, that I'm a winner. Of course, I'm winning in a different way. Like my winning is like more kind of spiritual, intellectual kind of thing. It's not winning in terms of having a power, money, but being kind of rich as a person, and knowing so many people, and traveling to 87 countries around the world, mostly predominantly with musicians, things that I liked, music. It makes my life extremely rich. And you
Yes.
are one of the parts of my richness. You are one of my best friends among musicians, and we not only kind of travel together, we communicate, and that's for me very, very important. Like I feel kind of I feel fulfilled.
Mm. To me, I really have to say that it's totally an honor to know you. Just like uh, just in very practical terms, even just when you look at your first 28 uh, years of your life, right? The ones that we've talked about today,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You have experienced like, I don't know, like a lot more than I have. Like
But
it's very different. Like for me, my life started very late somehow, and for you, it started very early in a way. Like as you say, not very positive in some ways, but it kind of like led you to arrive in the US and to stay
yeah,
there for 30 years, right? And
yeah,
so
30, now 31. But see, like I was natural traveler. my cousin that I met for the first time in 30 plus years, we had very good relationship. She also had a lot of rejection by her mother, my aunt, and by her stepfather and by her father. And we were speaking about that. I was natural traveler because since I was little kid, my mother was taking me to Sarajevo. Like it's like 3.5 hours from Jajce, but for little kid that was a huge travel, or 5-6 hours to Dubrovnik. That's a like today, like you are going to New Zealand, like from New York. When you are a kid, everything is bigger, and then especially when you go to Italy, like you are on another planet. And and then when my grandmother took me to Italy, 72, 73, and in 74 I went with my aunt and my cousins. After that, from 75, I started going by myself. I was 13 years old. They put me on the ship and I was traveling. And then I was traveling even during the winter time, during the winter break, the same thing, And, I was a kind of little kid, like, 13, 14, like, a kid. And, I was having my things and I was going to the trip and people say, oh, Leonardo is going to the big trip. Like, I was natural, of course, because of circumstances. I was traveling to visit my mother, but, I was a natural traveler, and even going by ferry, like during the summer was okay, but a couple of times during the winter time, look, sea is kind of, wavy, but I never was afraid of it. It was kind of say, wow, like people are kind of, some are vomiting, some are kind of fainting, because once was very, very hard. Like, I was 15 or 16. I was okay. And everybody was panicking because like, it's an old boat, like ferry, like, like boom, and we delayed for a couple of hours to arrive in Bari. Like it was like a kind of winter storm in December. But that's why I'm not afraid of flying. First time I flew in 1982. I didn't fly until 1982. I flew from, and I remember my flight. My mother came to Dubrovnik from Bari. I was studying in Belgrade. And that winter, I didn't go to Italy. Normally, but then I went to Dubrovnik because they spent vacation in Dubrovnik. And then I took flight and it was kind of very bad weather. And the flight ended up in Titograd, now called Podgorica, today's capital of Montenegro. They put us in a bus, and that's like 3 hours, like, going to Dubrovnik. I arrived in Dubrovnik like 4 o'clock in the morning. And that was my first flight. That was very shaky. It's supposed to be a flight of 1 hour and 15 minutes, 1 hour 20. It was kind of odyssey, like, from 3 p.m., like, when I went to the airport until like 3 a.m., like, and that was my very first flight. Like, I say, wow. But, but it was fun. But, second time when I took a flight, like, from also from Belgrade to Dubrovnik, it was kind of very natural for me to fly. Like, today I go to the airplane, like I'm afraid of cars. Like, as you know, I don't drive, never drove in my life. And I love Robert Frazza because Robert is one of the best drivers in the world. And when he drives, I say, wow, I'm in good hands, like, or with Beledo, like, or my stepfather when he was alive, because sometimes when I get in car with some people, they're like this, they're nervous, I cannot buy because I'm not big fan of cars and I don't like to travel by bus. I like trains and I got airplanes. When I go to an airport, I'm the happiest man in the world.
Like in the 70s, I have to ask my parents, but I think I was in Dubrovnik also for a summer vacation.
Yeah, you told me you went a couple of times to Croatia, right?
I think we went every year.
Every year.
Well, yeah. But I don't exactly remember where we were, but I'll have to ask my parents.
But of course, like, a lot of German tourists, like, German Italians were kind of the most numerous tourists on the Adriatic coast. And, Dubrovnik is, recently, like, I'm friend with Antonio Sanchez, and, he married to Tana Alexa. She's from Dubrovnik. And a couple of times when we met, like, we were talking about Dubrovnik, remembering, I spent a lot of great times in Dubrovnik. And I said to her, like, one day I would like to be in Dubrovnik with you, like to visit these kind of places that were very important in my life, because I think Dubrovnik was the first place in my life in late 60s, 69, 1970, when I started kind of understanding kind of certain things as a 7, 8 years old boy. And that's also the place where I saw the very first concert in my life. It was a band that was kind of psychedelic folk pop band called Dubrovački Trubaduri. They're from Dubrovnik. My mother kind of knew them, and she was friend with the brother of the main guy, who is a very well-known singer-songwriter in today, still alive, almost 80 years old, Ibrica Jusic, who, when I remember when I was a little kid, like he was buying me ice cream, and but I remember, like, being in this kind of house with this woman where my mother was staying, like, she was working for her, and going on the beach every day, like, as I eat, you got go from the home of the house, and you just cross little kind of path, and then you are already on the beach,
Yeah.
and but then I met also the guy who was having a little boat, like he was able to put like 12 people maximum, and then full of German tourists or Scandinavian tourists or Dutch tourists. But very often when his boat wasn't full, he will take me with me. I was like 8, 9 years old. He was taking me with me and to this kind of a little island where his wife was preparing like grilled fish, homemade wine, and homemade food for tourists. Then several years later, when I became kind of when I lived in Belgrade and in Italy, I reconnected with this guy. He did the same thing. Say, Leonard, like, I have only 10 people. Like, there is a place for you. Come, with me. It's 9 o'clock tomorrow. Like, oh, okay, come. Because he was taking a reservation. His wife was taking, or sister, he was taking the reservation day before. And then I was helping this kind of tourist, older lady to go out of the ship, of the little boat, to go to the little port, this little tiny island. Then we kind of walk for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We have this beautiful house, and she's grilling the fish and making a nice salad, and that smell of cucumber, like very fresh with rosemary, like it's I have a very great memories of Dubrovnik, and my sister was born in Dubrovnik, and see, like every place where I lived, regardless of what kind of experience I had with that place, bad or good, I always have a good memories of that place. And Dubrovnik definitely has a very special place in my life, since 1980, since late 80s, because I was frequenting that place since between 68 to late 80s. That's the first place when I realized, oh, that's not the place where I was born. That's a better place. Even though where I was born was a beautiful, if you see picture where I was born, it's spectacularly beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places in Europe. But it was a place where bad things are happening for little kids. And I went to Dubrovnik. That's the first place where I say, wow. And also a lot of tourists, beach, that's where I learned how to swim when I was 7, 8. And, but that's what those memories, like, kind of when I sing the sea, even though like Adriatic Sea is very small, in Italy, it's like across the Adriatic Sea. I was looking at that sea and I say, wow, I would like to go to other kind side of that sea. They told me there is Italy, like, and then a few years later, my mother actually moved there, like, and I always had this kind of good association with the sea, oceans, river, lakes, and mountains, like to see what is on the other side of the river, lake, and sea and ocean, and what's on the other side of the mountain. I was, because I'm curious by nature. I want to know. Like I'm very kind of noisy. I need to know what's going on. Like I'm never happy with things that is around me. It's not enough. Probably because of my relationship with my hometown, because I said, look, this is not, I don't feel comfortable here. And what is there, like, and that's why.
Let me ask you another, or maybe a difficult question, like, because I don't even know if you know an answer to it. But
look,
just like from my perspective, I would say like there was sort of like very, as you said, very dysfunctional um, level or layer in your family, which was your mother and your aunts, right? Um, and you had your grandmother and you had your grandfather, and so
who didn't have a good relationship, but they stayed together because of the convenience.
exactly, that's why I'm trying to understand now, or maybe you can find an answer for that.
Right.
So why do you think that sort of like evil or more evil part, basically, that of the family that you were involved in as a kid, right? Like, so how is that the relationship from the level of the grandparents to their kids, right? Like your mother, and then to you, like, why do you think that this part, this layer of the generational layer, was so unhealthy? Is it because of the war?
No, because that was in 60s, in 70s, like
Yeah, yeah,
the war.
but they were born maybe,
Yeah,
and
but
and grew up during the war, right?
my youngest aunt was born in Sarajevo in 1944 by accident because they didn't plan to have more kids in when they moved to Mostar from Macedonia, and then from Mostar in 44 they moved to Sarajevo, and she's a kind of sort of unwanted kind of third daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they accepted it as a daughter. But that woman. Look, she was like 10 years younger than my mother and 9 years younger than my other aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And what is amazing, like that, every one of them, they hated each other profoundly.
And where
And
does where does the hate come from?
I don't know.
You don't
It's
know.
a maybe personality. Like I have no idea. See, my mother was always a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
My mother in the 50s, when she was born in 34, in 52 she finished the high school, and she just wanted to be independent. She had very kind of a liberal independent life, and she was the one of the first people from my town to enjoy rock and roll and boogie woogie, those things from 50s. And in early 60s in Sarajevo, she befriended those people that were listening Beatles and Rolling Stones, and she was always rebel. She probably didn't understand these things, what they are, but she enjoyed them because it's part of a rebellion. Because this kind of Western culture was coming to Yugoslavia, and then if like Tito decided in 1964 that Yugoslavia is not communist country anymore. Yugoslavia was communist country until 64. Then Tito switched that. It became a socialist country with free market. Actually, today's China is based on Tito's Yugoslavia post 64 because like everybody was able to be impresario, like to have their own business. Before 64 it was pure communism.
Mm-hmm.
But that coincided with this kind of movements that in Sarajevo, that actually Sarajevo, more than Belgrade and Zagreb, which are bigger cities, like it became kind of epicenter of the new youth culture of the rebellion. And my mother was there, and she was rebel. And but my mother always had difficult character. She was fighting with everybody. She was very stubborn, and she had she changed the job so many times. She was fired so many times. That was personality. Like once I told this story, I believe at Jimmy Johnson, and he said like oh, that's why your mother was bipolar, and oh, that's how you can be patient and
Mm-hmm.
understand our man, Alan Holsworth, because Alan completely different, Alan, but I was able to, through this kind of difficult experiences with the bipolar people, which were all three aunts of mine, to understand this highly bipolar and dysfunctional genius of Alan Holsworth, and actually see like all my bad things help me to understand more about life. But going back to that kind of this middle level between my grandparents and me, like all these three sisters, they hated each other. They had some probably kind of chemical issues in their brain, like because of bipolar disorders. Also, my aunt, older one, when she married a Serbian guy who was the father of my cousin that I liked, she suffered a lot of physical abuse from her husband, and then she divorced, and then she married to another guy who was alcoholic, and who didn't have good relationship with my with my cousin, who then came to live with my grandparents and with me, and they had 2 kids. And see, me and my cousin have very similar kind of things, going on, and then also when my aunt married for the second time this guy, probably they had kind of a good relationship in the first couple of years, but then after that, it was just a relation of convenience, which means that we are talking about people that never found happiness in their life. And maybe that was kind of a reason why they had this kind of confrontational characters and literally being in conflicts with literally everybody. Like, my mother, like this, she didn't have friends, because every time when she made a friend, it was, after a certain point, it was a problem, like, and then my youngest aunt, who was 9-10 years younger, probably seeing 2 older dysfunctional sisters, she became very kind of introvert with herself. And then she hated her, both of them. She hated my mother and my aunt. And she became actually a very mean person to me, because I was a son of a sister she hated. And my cousin was daughter of her other sister that she hated. And I don't know why. See, I received, like, I was tortured physically, like, since I was a little kid, like 6-7 years old, until like age of 15, 16, like, I got a lot of kind of physical kind of violence against me by my aunt, also by another aunt, but for unknown reasons, like, nobody. See, she's still alive, and she knew that I'm in town, but I didn't want to visit. I don't have nothing to do. See, like, all these things I can tell you with. Look, my mind is completely clear. My soul is completely clear. Like, I was liberated by all those things when I was 18 years old, when I moved to Belgrade, because I was in other, like, my world was that world that my grandfather told me, other side of the mountain.
Yes.
And I didn't have time to, like, I know that a lot of people that had my kind of difficulties when they were kids, like, that they suffer, I didn't have, I was very clear with myself. Of course, I probably have some little traumas that I'm not aware of it. That's why, like, probably, like, I manifest certain of my things in a certain way because of this influence. I cannot control that, but like psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, philosophically, I'm completely clear and clean from all these kind of traumas that I had for almost 4 years. And but see, this is the thing, like, that I learned in my life. If things cannot be explained, I don't need things to be explained. If, look, I just move on, like, but there is one thing that I actually, when I became, like, I never had a good relationship with my mother, but when I moved to USA, we kind of got some kind of connection. And when I married my wife over there, like, she came from Brazil, we met in New York, then she went back to Brazil, I went to Brazil, then we went to Italy, we married there, like, and then she was kind of okay with me, because she was maybe confused, because, wow, my son was a loser, and now he's successful man, he got a beautiful. My mother, my grandfather, my stepfather, nobody. I had different circles of friends, and like, one group of these friends didn't know what I was doing with other group of friends. I had kind of very secretive life, like, and when I was going to Napoli or Sicily or to Rome or to Milano or to, when I went secretly to Maldives, nobody knew, like, when I didn't say that to my sister. You went to Maldives? I went to Maldives. I said to my mother that I went to Rome. I got some money because I was translating things. I went to Maldives for 6 days. I had a good time, and I came back and said, "Oh, you have a very nice color." Yeah, of course. the weather in Sicily it was very nice in October. Yeah, like it's I even though I'm not liar,
Mm.
but in my life I needed to lie a lot. Like
Mm.
when I was suffering this kind of physical violence from my aunts, I had to lie because to protect myself. I had to lie to my mother to protect my privacy.
Mhm.
And on one side, I wasn't happy to be a liar, but on the other side, I had to be a liar because you know I didn't want them to know what I'm doing. Like I wanted to be myself, but I lied a lot to them. I did lie to my friends. To some friends, actually, I did lie because say, "Oh, where did what did you I had to lie because I didn't want them." Like this group of friends, I didn't want to interfere anything with this group of friends. you
Mhm.
know I lived in this kind of very secretive kind of multi-level walls, and that's why I was happy when I came to New York. I was happy because I was free of those lies that I was forced to lie to people just to protect myself, and I experienced a complete and absolute freedom here in New York, and that's without New York I don't know if I will be ever able to be what I am.
Yeah, so you broke free of the very unhealthy structures of the family,
Right, and
basically.
I built my own structure because then because always I wanted to be myself, and because see, like I always had a theory which is actually to me very practical kind of things. A lot of people try to be like other people in a real life or even as an artist. Like
Mhm.
artists are kind of musicians. They try to imitate. In my life, working with Alan Holsworth, like I found so many imitators because instead of being influenced by Alan Holsworth and trying something by themselves, they're just copying 100%.
Mhm.
That's thinking, kind of in art. But in a real life, everybody wanted to be like somebody else.
Mhm.
I remember I was at a birthday party, and then they asked one girl, like 17 years old girl, that we were kind of big party, like a lot of families. They asked what you would like to do, like in Italy in late 70s, late 80s. Say what you would like to do, like when you are a grown girl. Say, oh, I would like to be like any other girl.
Mhm.
I said, wow, how like I said, look, for me, look, I cannot conceive to be like anybody. Like my mother wanted me when she came to that room when I was playing some music to that kind of pseudo girlfriend. Uh, say, to say, I'm sorry, you are strange. Why you cannot be like everybody else? To listen
Mhm.
normal music, to be normal guy, to be having normal things, And she forgets that she wasn't normal during her whole life.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but I always wanted to be myself because look, the easiest thing in the world is to be yourself because then you cannot make mistakes because if you're trying to be somebody else you have to be amazing actor to remember everything
Mhm.
that is not you, that is
Mhm.
somebody else. And
Mhm.
look, I'm not very good in being focused, like as you know, like I have this kind of a dyslexia, mental dyslexia since I was a child, and I cannot focus, like And then imagine if I try to pretend to be somebody else, how I can remember, like to be like this or that. It's difficult. Like it's
Mhm.
the easiest to be like myself, like the way that I am. Then accept me or reject me. I don't care. This is who am I,
Mhm.
and I realized that on long term everything that I wasn't accepted for when I was up to 28 years old, everything was acceptable after I came to New York. And that's what made me the person that I'm now.
Fantastic. Hey, Leo, so I have an idea because we have sort of like come to this middle part of your life. And so let's maybe call this part one, and we're going to
Yeah.
do another conversation. Um,
Yeah. And I would like to be this in three parts because part two can be just 90s when I came to New York because
mhm.
that's the part of my life that not so many people know. And that was
Yes.
extremely, extremely rich. in things and events and people and knowledge and learning about life and the big city, which kind of sort of led me to things that I'm doing since 2000, 2001.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I know that that really is the first 10 years in New York. I don't know much about. I mean, I know a little
Yeah,
bit, but
yeah, but it's
yeah.
it's very it's kind of was very. I was very fortunate. I can introduce, like I can tell you a little bit. Then we will continue next time. When I came to New York, like first like maybe 4 or 5 months, were kind of fishing around, like to find my place. I was with my best friend who helped me a lot, and he said, "Look, now you're on." And I started working in the restaurant, and suddenly I met a guy this is the guy, a Brazilian guy, because I didn't speak English. I spoke Portuguese, and through some multiple kind of connections, this person introduced me to this one, to the other one, to other one, to other one. Finally, I came to this Brazilian guy who came to USA in 1972, and we became close friends. That guy changed my life forever. And Fernando Natalici from Studio T. And I was suddenly from November of 1990, I was in middle of everything music business in New York City, shows and people coming to our office. I remember the little things say, "Oh, look at Egberto Gismonti, like, wow, John Scofield. Oh, look, it's Rolf Towner, and it was amazing." But we will
Yeah,
talk about that
we'll talk about it
later.
then. And but it's amazing that like the African and the malaria experience that was in '88, right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
87, 88. Yeah.
Yes, and so then the really like in this really really short period of time, you turned your life around.
Yeah, but
Uh,
also there are look, there are a couple of things during my trip to Africa, like that I didn't say, because see, like as we spoke a lot, like you cannot touch any little thing in my life that I can just ask me. I cannot say things my life in just one sentence,
mhm,
because my life for various reasons was very rich. Not because I wanted to be rich; it just happened that in that way, And there is one person whom I'm trying to reconnect now that I met in San Tome. It was a documentary about him was made in Basque country last year, and he was Basque that I met in San Tome. It's a very long story. Maybe I should say that next time, because he also influenced me to some music, especially from Spain and Basque country. And with all this kind of depression and insecurity about life that I experienced during my journey in a tropical country, that guy actually gave me a lot of inspiration. And he had extremely hard life. And only last 2 years ago, he came back to the normality, because he was actually prisoner being a free man on this little tiny island, because country, France and Spain didn't have a kind of extradition there was no extradition things between France, and he was Basque as a young man. He was part of ETA.
mhm,
He wasn't terrorist, but he was part of ETA. And of course, during the Franco's regime and later, even when Franco left, Spanish police was very brutal until just recently.
mhm,
Franco stayed in Spain even after he died, and then he was actually sold by Spanish government, because they couldn't get him in Spain, to Ecuador. In Ecuador, he was tortured, and then they decided to send him to San Tome Principe, where he was free man, but no documents, and he wasn't able to go to any place. And he was only few people on the island knew who he was. And everybody knew, oh, that's the Spanish guy who came here to do research, but he stayed there since 1986. And only few years ago, thanks to his girlfriend, she's also Basque, but from France, after many, many years, since 86, 32 years later, he was able to go back to France. I don't think that he can go to Spain yet. Probably
mhm,
that's the next thing, but he's in France, in Basque country, in France, very close to France, to Spain.
mhm,
But now I was looking to find him, but but now I think I'm able to. I saw this documentary several times in last months, and I would like to see, like, now I'm in phase in last few years to reconnect with people from my past.
Yes.
And reconnecting with Borislav in 2009 was the first time that I actually reconnected with my past. It was coincidence. He found me on Facebook. We found each other on Facebook, and I always liked him. But before Facebook, like before internet, like you don't know about people. You just fantasize. But then from 2009, gradually, I started reconnecting with people and finding these people from my past. I found a Brazilian guy that I had a good time in Paris in 1886, and he lives now in Vancouver. Like I found like a couple of dear friends that I was friendly in my hometown, that we are thanks to Facebook, that I haven't heard from them in ages, and see, like, probably because we are getting older, we are going back to the past to revisit our past, but to revisit good things. See, I'm not going to the past to revisit bad things. No, I'm going to the past because past is also important. I don't live from the past, but I like to revisit past because that will make me even more kind of stronger as a person. And that probably that finally can, maybe something inside of me that I am not able to control or think of. Maybe still there is some kind of ghost of the past, and maybe going to the past to see kind of these kind of positive things during the negative years. Because don't forget, even though Angola and São Tomé and Príncipe were amazing period of life for me, but on the other side I was very depressed. And when I went to São Tomé, like this guy, and we played soccer on the beach and we spoke about it, and then only like 10 days after I met him, he liked me. He told me his story, and just the fact that he told me his story, yeah, he told me that, look, Leonardo, you're like, I don't know why I told you all this story. Like, you are, I just liked you. Like, and of course I'm not, I wasn't telling to anybody else about that. Of course that was like 32 years ago. He was there just for arrive like a year and a half. And then he only was able to leave in 2 years ago, in 2019, before the COVID.
Incredible.
And those are the things. See, I like this thing because that's kind of connection, because I know one day when we meet, I know that I will meet him. He was born in 1958, 40 years older than me. And I know that I will have a good time. We'll have good wine. We will have a good conversation. We will listen to a couple of these kind of progressive folk bands from Basque Country that he introduced me, like Isaiah, It's Okay, like that, that he was playing because he had some kind of tapes of music from his country, like, and to remember old times, drinking wine, like, and having nice food, like, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing for him because I was one of the, probably I will ask him if I met him. Probably I was the first guy that he ever told his story. And I like this. I like this kind of reconnection. Like, see, like my life is already full of people, but it's never enough for me. I want to know more people. I don't know how I'm dealing with time, but doesn't matter. It makes me just better, person and richer to know more people. And it's all interesting. Like, and also with Dennis, when we are talking like every week for several months, like a couple of hours on Zoom, we were recording and transcribing that. And also these things help me like to write about myself, like, because, due to circumstances and conditions of life and series of events, I had very interesting life. If I put myself outside of myself, I had a very, very rich life. It was forced on me. And because in the beginning it was forced to me, it became my modus vivendi, modus operandi, because I was used to it. And then, it was so intense in first 28 years that it had to be in that way.
Yes.
And that's a great thing, like, especially like, being now in a field that I like, music, and, it's amazing. Like, I'm fortunate guy, like, knowing like people like Tony Levy, like, we call him like Uncle Tony, like, that's, look, I'm not just the guy who works with him. I'm not just a guy who receives money, say, okay, Pat, Marcus, Robert, like, Tony, this is your money and those are expensive. No, we are friends, like, like not friends, like we shared food together. We got, to, it's different relationship. Like, like I remember when I went to Phil Manzanera's house, we became friends with Yaro and said, wow, I remember this guy from the cover of, inside the cover of the albums Roxy Music. He had amazing outfit with those amazing extravagant shoes and boots, and and then I'm with him and he makes a tea for me, and he treats me as a friend. Like, this is the beauty. This is the my repayment. Like, that's how I was paid off. My difficult life before paid me like very generously to know amazing people, and also thanks to these amazing people, I can easily reach to other amazing people without any difficulty, without being like, like kind of, like I remember when I met David Coverdale, I wasn't, just that he's a very famous guy, but he was friend of Derek Sherman since late 60s, and I knew about him, and he came, oh, you are that guy, you are Leonardo. Let me tell you a story about Alan Holsworth, like, because Derek told him that I was working with Alan, say, oh, like when I left this Papa, I wanted to my band, I loved two guitar players, John McLaughlin and Alan Holsworth. I wanted Alan in my band, like, but it didn't happen, like, I love Alan, say hello to him, like, I mean, like, this is the first time when you face like a very famous guy, and he comes to you like boom, like, we are buddies, like, and then, I can go anytime, like, to.
Hey, Leonardo, you are famous. You are famous.
No, look, yeah, due to the kind of circumstances, I became kind of known guy, but I will never be known guy if I do not know like known people. Then because I'm kind of like Bill Bruford called me enabler, which probably I am, and then because of my connections with very well-known guys in kind of music that I'm interested in, then I became kind of known by default. But I'm not known because look, I will never ever be able to do what I'm doing without you guys, because that's how it is, like, and I'm very thankful that you guys gave me opportunity to reinvent myself. Look, I don't come from music business background. I don't come from those days, like, I just came as a fan, like, to help Elton Dean and then Alan Holsworth, and to reconnect with PFM from Italy, and then I boom, like things started happening, and now I know everybody, and people know me, like,
I think there's something really interesting as sort of like for me, the result of this conversation today is I believe there's some sort of currency, and I'm not talking about money. There's a currency of energy, or a currency of, you could say, work or life experience, or things you had to deal with, right?
Yeah,
That sort of like puts you on like on eye level with successful people. What that means is there's a certain way to have lived life, and to have like really gone deep into the dough of life and massaged the dough for a long time, that sort of like puts you on the same level as people who have
because it's called the human capital. Like, in a life we have two capitals. It's a kind of money capital related to value of the money, of the goods, of the real estate, of physical things. And there is a human capital. And then like 60s and 70s, which is kind of music that inspired me the most, and thanks to music of 60s and 70s that I also learned about music before 60s and after 70s. It's the probably only period in history in 20th century where art was very much related to the human capital. But then in the early 70s, when accountants and managers and lawyers started dominating the music business, that human capital kind of disappeared from the music industry. was about money, making money. But what is happening now, because I started a label and a booking agency because of the disaster in music industry, but because of the circumstances, because I was trying to help a couple of friends that I befriended, like Elton Dean, then later Alan Holdsworth, to ask me for help. And then that's how I show my human capital based on my experience, because I didn't have the money capital, neither I had experience in music business, but I had that human capital. And that's why kind of later, like kind of, if you see like who my book about legends, they're all kind of rejects from the music industry, including Tony. Like, look, Tony, you know that very well. Stickman and Tony Levin Group were with agency group, and they only things that they cared about King Crimson and Peter Gabriel and other big acts. And these kind of sub agents were asking me, "Oh, Leonardo, you have friends in Mexico, in Brazil. We have this guy in Argentina who, like, who is booking the Stickman, and maybe you can help us." And look, I was helping the agents, and Tony knew that. And then when the Steve Martin moved to other agency, Tony came to me, look, and which is kind of privileged to do that. But also I was able, because of my persona, to get all these kind of amazing artists that this official market of the music business or business for music rejected. Because look, I remember when I started helping Alan Holdsworth, nobody wanted to book Alan Holdsworth, because who wants to make 10% on $2,000-$3,000 per gig? That's probably happened with Stickman. I remember, like, first tour of USA that I did, we had 4 weeks. Normally you were playing 6-7 weeks, because I actually based that tour on my experience touring with Alan Holdsworth, but then like Frank Gabali came to me, Scott Henderson came to me, and Alex Conley came to me, because of course he has Testament, but then his jazz and fusion and progressive and world music things, like he kind of find out the time, the guy, because if he goes like to the other kind of official guys that they're dominating music industry, they will not be able to assist people that are having like $1,500 or $2,000, $3,000 per gig, because they have like $20,000 rent to pay. But see what is happening now because of the COVID. Everything is downsizing, and then everybody's loser. But actually, as a small guy who didn't make so much money, I made just a little bit, enough for me to live. I actually became a winner. And then other people come to me, like Leo Lyons from 10 years after. He's 77. He's in good shape. He wants to play. Oh, Arnie Goodman, my friend, photographer, he introduced me to him. And I'm, because this is like about that. I agree with you about that currency, which is human capital, because in the new world, in the new kind of system of how world, we are still in a state of confusion that is being prolonged because of COVID. But I think I'm positive that these things will change, because I think there will be more space for independent people. It will take a little time. And that's why I'm confident about future, because I was actually, remember when he came from Japan, me and Gary had conversation, and I said, what the fuck I'm going to do? And Gary said, what the fuck I'm going to do? And you said, what the fuck I'm going to do? Like, it was uncertainty. But then, this kind of uncertainty made us even kind of stronger. And we come with kind of sort of experience. And then we are, because see, we know what is the struggle. We know what is fighting for $1 little. Those guys were fighting for $1 little million, and we were fighting for $1 little. And that's our advantage. That's our currency. And maybe our $1 little has much more value than their $1 little million.
Yes, exactly. Hey, okay, Leonardo, let's leave it at that for today.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
excellent.
It was wonderful to talk with you.
Yeah, we will talk again, and privately, of course. And
of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody who is watching. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye bye.